I'd like to thank the Eastside Arts Centre for this wonderful festival, and for Gaynor Kane for inviting me to be involved. And I just think that the theme Connection is a really poignant and beautiful theme, especially this year after the pandemic. And I'm hoping that the extract that I read from my book, Rejuvenation, illustrates how important connection is to us as human beings in nurturing us and keeping us safe. Ayushi Dewan lay propped up and dozing. Her silver hair hung in strands over one shoulder, flowing down onto her pale pink sensor fabric tunic that kept her body temperature constant. Ayushi's choice of colour lent a warm hue to her skin. It looked like rich toffee, warm and soft, etched with fine grey-brown wrinkles. Bobbie's hands were pale against her patient's arm as she felt for the pulse. Ayushi opened her eyes, the lids disappearing into a swathe of wrinkles that reached down into her cheeks. The old lady's face folded into a smile as she spoke. It's good to feel the human touch. The scanner is so impersonal. Bobbie kept her hand on Ayushi's wrist, remembering her small hand in a less wrinkled version of this one 30 years ago, to her first day at school, and the first time she'd touched this woman who'd taught 3 generations of Bobbie's family. Okay, you caught me, Bobbie said, smiling back. Technology often alienated the elderly, leaving them lonely. How do you feel today? Much better. Ayushi pushed herself up in the bed. The swelling in my joints seems to have gone down, and I'm not in as much pain. In fact, I think I missed a pill last night, and I haven't been able to do that in 10 years. She nodded to her bedside table. An unopened Medipatch lay in a tray. Bobbie picked up the medicine, smiling at Ayushi's description of the Medipatch as a pill, even though it looked more like an old-fashioned band-aid. Last week, Ayushi had been moved into this ward because she had needed pain management. This is great, Ayushi. And you're comfortable? Pain-free? Bobbie studied her patient's face, noting with a lift to her heart the relaxed expression and the twinkle that had returned to her old teacher's eyes. Ayushi nodded, her implanted teeth too big for her face as she grinned. I feel great. As a geriatrician, Bobbie didn't experience her patients recovering often. The symptoms Ayushi displayed were strange and most likely temporary, but preferable to the permanent relief that her patients ultimately received. Bobbie made a mental note to discuss Ayushi's improvement with Dr. Hicks. She turned to the old lady and caught her staring at her hands. What is it? It makes my decision harder now. Ayushi kept her head bowed, her eyes down. Your decision? Bobbie's scalp prickled. Ayushi waved a hand. Nothing. Never mind. You're not thinking of... Bobbie didn't want to trigger the blink audio by saying the words elective passing. Ayushi turned her head away. Did you have a nice visit with your granddaughter yesterday? Bobbie brightened her tone, but her pulse pounded in her ears. Ayushi nodded. Bobbie's heart plunged to her stomach. She looked around. The ward was quiet. No carebots, no staff nearby. She wasn't allowed to turn off her blink while on duty, but if she were careful, her conversation would go unnoticed. Your granddaughter must have been thrilled to hear you were getting better, Bobbie said. Silence descended in the room. Ayushi turned to face her. Tears quivered in her brown eyes, her lips pressed into a thin line. Careful, careful. Bobbie narrowed her eyes in warning. It's all right for you, Ayushi said. By my count, you and your sister have 2 rights to birth now. Am I right? Sadness puckered Bobbie's brow. Her father and grandfather's deaths in the war each translated into a birthright. And there was another on the way. Bobbie tore her thoughts from her dying mother and nodded, searching for improbable words. How could she urge this lovely woman to stay alive if she wanted to go because she couldn't bear the pain any longer? And how could Ayushi's granddaughter push her towards elective passing? Medical advances had smashed the biological clock, yet some people were just too impatient, too selfish. But was it selfish of Bobbie to want to keep her patients alive? With the right pain management, the right resources, everyone could live a good life right to the end. A natural end. It makes sense. Ayushi's fingers toyed with the button on the cuff of her nightgown. Biting her tongue, Bobbie smoothed down the sheets and straightened Ayushi's pillows. You don't have to, Bobbie began. Ayushi cut in. Boy, those government ads, they were rough. Belliscore had portrayed a future world of old folks rotting away in unstaffed care facilities with the streets full of wild-eyed, starving street urchins who had no parental supervision. The ads had seemed to Bobbie to be less about population age structure and more about scaring folks into supporting euthanasia. Elective passing was the thin end of that wedge. There are medical breakthroughs every day, Bobbie said. I don't need to live forever. That's not what I mean. But Bobbie never knew how to explain her stance. Sure, elective passing would release a suffering elder from pain with dignity, but death was such a full stop. Bobbie picked up the unopened medipatch beside Ayushi's bed. You have been feeling better though, haven't you? Yes, Ayushi said, her voice a shade darker. But it might be too late.